President Donald Trump has put a threatened massive military strike on Iran on hold. He has once again shifted everyone's attention on a possible diplomatic breakthrough. Now, in a post on Truth Social, Trump said the United States was locked and loaded for an unprecedented strike against Iran. However, he later announced that the operation had been paused following appeals from Iran and regional partners as efforts began to explore a possible agreement. Now, he added that Israel was committed to pausing the actions to rapidly finalize this deal. Iran's media, however, denied President Donald Trump's claim that the Islamic Republic asked the United States to refrain from conducting new strikes. And while the immediate threat of a strike has eased, the bigger question remains: is this the beginning of a diplomatic breakthrough or simply a pause before tensions rise again? The answer could depend heavily on the Gulf. Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries have been closely watching the situation, aware that any major U.S. attack on Iran could have consequences far beyond the battlefield. Now, according to an Axios report, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman spoke with Trump, and he expressed concerns over the impact of large-scale strikes on Iran. Riyadh reportedly asked Washington for clarity on its plans, and it pushed for de-escalation, fearing that a wider conflict could destabilize the region. For Gulf countries, the situation is complicated. They have long-standing security partnerships with the United States and share concerns over Iran's regional activities. However, they also understand that any conflict involving Iran and the United States, it would not remain confined to the two countries alone. For the past few months, the U.S. has been carrying out attacks on Iran, while Tehran has responded with strikes in the Gulf region. Gulf countries now fear that Iran could expand its targets beyond U.S. military bases on their soil and potentially strike critical regional infrastructure as well. Iran has made it clear that it would not simply absorb an attack. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has warned that Tehran is fully prepared to respond to any U.S. or allied aggression. In fact, he said that Iran would use all means necessary and repeated Tehran's warning that any attack on Iranian infrastructure, it would bring an eye-for-an-eye response. Tehran has also warned Gulf countries that any participation in military action against Iran, it would have consequences. Iran's fast said that potential Iranian counterattack would target Gulf energy sites, including Khawar oil field in Saudi Arabia, Ruwais refinery and Zakum oil field in UAE, North Ghadir gas field and Ras Laffan LNG facilities in Qatar, Burgan oil field in Kuwait, Al Mihaj facilities in Bahrain, and Leviathan and Tamar gas fields located in Israel. Well, that brings the region to a difficult question. Is this turning into Iran versus the Arab world? For now, it does not appear that Gulf countries are looking for a direct confrontation with Tehran. In fact, their recent actions suggest the opposite. They appear to be trying to stop the situation from reaching that point, but the risks are increasing. There's growing discord within the U.S. administration over how to handle the Iran conflict. Earlier this week, NBC News reported that Trump erupted in anger during a White House meeting, expressing his frustration over limited available options to end the war. To discuss this in greater detail, joining us live from London is Chris Toll. He's the director and the current lead spokesperson for CABU, Council for Arab-British Understanding. Mr. Doll, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. Now, I want to start by trying to decode the latest that we're getting from Washington, where President Trump says that he has called off the planned strikes because the outlines of a deal are taking shape. Iran, however, has flatly rejected Trump's claim that Tehran asked Washington to refrain from launching these military strikes, or it has changed its stance on the Strait of Hormuz. Now, Mr. Dole, we've seen many versions of these competing narratives play out in the last 5 months. I'm just curious to know, how are you reading into these contradictory claims that are coming out?
This is the fourth time, by my count, in the last 5 months that President Trump has threatened some massive, huge bombardment of Iran, and then at the last moment, at 1 minute to midnight, says it's not going to happen, and he pulls back. Simply, he's beginning to lose any credibility in these threats, though one can never be sure that, on the next occasion, that it won't actually happen. The harsh reality is that actually the Iranian threats carry much more credibility because they've actually enacted exactly what they say they would, that if there is an attack, they would actually respond, they will attack American bases within the region, and so forth. So it's really hard to assess really where we are right now because of this sort of yo-yoing, this Groundhog Day that we're all immersed in. I mean, go back to April the 7th, and the whole world was aghast, and there was huge criticism because President Trump has said he was going to sort of bomb Iran back into the Stone Age and would take out all its energy infrastructure and the like. So one wonders, have we progressed, or are we just going to be stuck in this endless vortex of sort of semi-ceasefire to threats to back to a sort of ceasefire without any real political progress? There have been talks, but it never seems to land up in a proper, signed, verified deal.
Right, Mr. Dole, but since Iran has expanded its military pressure beyond the United States, targeting Gulf countries that host American military assets, that has raised a larger strategic question here because these states are no longer just bystanders. Do you think this war has begun to reshape itself into a much broader confrontation between Iran and the Gulf states, in your assessment?
Well, let's remember that Iran attacked the Gulf states, but also Iraq and other countries, Israel, of course, right from the start. This happened very early on in the conflict that originally broke out on the 28th of February. So Iran is not going to pull back from that option because militarily it needs that horizontal front. It needs to be able to attack a wide array of targets because it knows that the United States could defend one or two countries, but not a broad front. So the Iranian regime understands its military limitations. It needs to stretch the American ability to defend its allies and its bases across the region. Conversely, President Trump is also beginning to realize the US's limited capabilities because if Iran attacks any of these bases and allied countries, that the United States is using up far faster than it can resupply, can export all the munitions and capabilities that are necessary to take those missiles and drones out. And of course, it costs the United States much more than it does Iran. So Iran could use very cheap weaponry, very cheap drones, whilst the United States has to use extremely expensive munitions to defend its allies against this. So President Trump has realized, far from being a situation in which the United States could win this war on day one, that actually Iran has capabilities to disrupt, and the United States hasn't really got a viable option to stop this. So we're in this logjam.
Right, and speaking about the role of the Gulf countries, Trump's move, it comes after Saudi Arabia state media reported that Prince Mohammed bin Salman, he pushed for de-escalation. And notably, there were no strikes reported from either Iranian or US sides overnight. And this was following the announcement. But having said that, what role do you think Saudi Arabia and these other Gulf countries may be playing in the crisis?
Well, I think that they don't all have the same position, but Saudi Arabia definitely is in a bind. It doesn't want to be taken for granted. It doesn't want the assumption going out that it's a soft target, that there will be no response. So hence we have seen Saudi Arabia taking action against the Houthis in Yemen recently, but also in Iraq. And whilst it doesn't want to get sucked into direct confrontation with Iran, it realizes, the leadership in Saudi, that that cannot be maintained forever, that it has to demonstrate a deterrent as well. The trouble is, Saudi Arabia can't defend all its oil fields, all its pipelines, all its essential critical infrastructure from an Iranian drone and missile attack. It's simply not possible. And that is really the crux of the issue. It's in the Saudi interest to get the Strait of Hormuz open, to get the end of this war. That would be the best outcome for it. But also, I think the leadership is very conscious that it also requires a political agreement that binds Iran into not being an aggressor within the region. Now, other Gulf states have differing views. So you have Oman, which has quite close relations with Iran, that has been attacked, but not severely over the last 4 or 5 months. We haven't seen attacks there recently, I think. Whereas the United Arab Emirates has been attacked right from February in a far more strident way by Iran. And there are reasons for that, arguably, perhaps because it's close relations with Israel. But whatever, the Emirates has been hit much harder. Kuwait has been hit quite a bit recently in terms of the US bases in Kuwait. So they all have slightly differing positions. But ultimately, it is in their economic and security interest that there is a proper deal, that the Strait of Hormuz gets back open, they can get their oil and gas industries up and working again and get out of this, because they've got a lot of rebuilding, they've got a lot of confidence to be regrown, to attract investment and business back to the Gulf. And that's going to take time.
Right, Mr. Doyle, and the conflict, it appears to be in this precarious holding pattern where military power is trying to shape diplomacy, but it's been 5 months and diplomacy is yet to bring about any breakthrough. But do you believe that there still is a credible path to diplomacy, or has that conflict reached a point where another round of escalation is only a matter of time?
I think there is a credible path to diplomacy, not least because I think that the military options for both Iran and the United States are not enticing. Whilst Iran can defend itself in the sense of giving a very painful blow to the United States' interests, it can't really knock the United States out. And the United States can't really knock Iran out unless it's prepared to go all in for a very costly long-term ground invasion. And of course, in that scenario, it might prevail, but would be extremely costly. And there's no political appetite for that in the United States. So for those reasons, I think that there are avenues for a diplomatic solution, but they're going to be tough because there's no trust. And those critical red lines that are there on both sides are still wide apart. And I think it might be quite tough in advance of the midterm elections for Donald Trump to look weak. He won't want to be caving in or be seen to cave in to Iranian demands on the nuclear file, on ballistic missiles, on other matters, on the Strait of Hormuz. So it may be, perhaps we have to wait until after November and we'll be stuck in this, as you say, holding pattern.
Right. Of course, Mr. Doyle, this is still an evolving situation and we'll continue to track the developments closely. But for now, thank you so much for your comprehensive analysis of the situation.
Thank you so much for having me.